Good afternoon, everybody. This was my introduction slide. But my students always find very funny as well. I'm kind of people shy and I'm a lecturer, so that's a good combination. My handicap used to be 7, now it's 15, so it's not coming the right way. My father was a physician, and he did his PhD research on magnetic fields. So I guess you researched wrong at Hooft. What I'm going to do, Niels asked me to do to show some of my work, and I like to think with CSS, and I took the opportunity to do some experiments with anchor positioning. I didn't know a lot about anchor positioning, so it was both ways a good opportunity. It's about anchor positioning and things I like as well. I like math, I like animations, and I like custom properties. And I like to make stupid things, not pretty, stupid. And I do that on purpose because if I make things that not already there, I know for sure I will run into problems that I don't know I could run into them. And making fun things is fun, and probably more fun than your day job. As he says, my code to prototype tool. So I'm not a developer. I never was and never will be. But I was a designer who likes to make prototypes and likes to know a lot about code because have to know your material as a designer. This talk will not be a detailed lecture about spec. I'm not an expert on the spec. I gathered some great resources. So if you want to have a more overview like talk, you can read one of those or look at the videos. Anchor positioning is part of Intro 2025. So yay. So all the experiments work in Chrome, but you have to enable the experiment web platform features flag to make them work. The spec is alive, not finished. I was working on one experiment and it wouldn't work. I updated Chrome and it worked. Then my bug was solved. So that will probably happen the next half year a lot of times. So that's the introduction. What I will show some of my work, do some live coding, find out what is possible, but also the problems I ran into that are not possible, to also give a view in how I learn things. Let's start with my hobby. I think this is an afternoon well spent creating this. Let's have a moment of time. And I'm a lecturer, so I'm fortunate enough that I can make other people do silly stuff as well. So this is from last month's course. This is CSS only project. It is the cut from David made, and you can make a block, and you can change the angle, and there's some summary here, and some popover thingies, and then you can change all the. Let's make him cute. Small body, big head, orange. Oh. So that's my day job, doing fun things with students and learning CSS and designing and programming in the meantime. 2 years ago, then the anchor positioning spec was, I think, for the first time, a little bit relevant. I did some experiments. This was one of the experiments I did. And actually, I was working on mathematics then, so I wanted to calculate the position of the radio buttons, but why not put in some anchor positioning as well? This was another experiment I did. for the justification of text, but then more fun. And some popovers that you give some advice on what they think. So what you and the last thing I think is what I found most interesting. You can anchor to more than one anchor, so you can from list to grid, of to from grid to list to a list, and you can change the view. But the spec was quite bulky, so I dropped it for a couple of years. So now what I did this year, intended use case for anchor positioning is this. I think you have an anchor, you have some information that you want to stick to something else, and it moves around. And if you move to the corner, it doesn't overflow, it nicely stays within the boundaries. And you can even make it flip at the top. And the core concept is you have the anchor. There are 9 areas around the anchor, of 8 around it, and the 9th is below the anchor itself. And then you can position the element you want to stick to the anchor. You can put in one or more of the elements, areas. This is the core, and that it could be a pop-up, it could be a new select element, whatever you like, a menu, submenu. Some things I learned while doing the basic stuff. First step, HTML. I have an anchor and I have an element. To do anchor positioning, you have to give the anchor a name. Let's call it a magnet. And then the element has to have a position anchor. And then we have to use magnets. And then there is position area, let's say top. We'll put it in one or more of the areas. So if you turn on the areas, you see it's in the top region and it stays there. You could bottom or whatever. Una Kravitz made a nice tool for this. And then you get the code you need. You could also use the logical properties, but they trip me up all the time. So I use them if I have to make something that has to be used by other people. But if I make something for myself, I just use top, left, right, and bottom. There's one thing missing in this demo. The 9th, the area itself isn't a part of this tool. So you can center as well, and that's not here. Okay, let's use top again. Now, for one time I will use block start, I guess. Does that work? Yeah. No. Top. What you get for free is if you move to the corners, it stays in the boundaries. But flipping you have to do yourself. And you can use position try fallbacks for that. And then you can say flip in the block direction. Now if you move up, it flips to the bottom. I want to have some space between the element and the anchor, so I use margin. Now let's use some margin in the block direction. It works, but it works too soon, though there's also a white space at the bottom. So I use white block end. End. That's correct. Yeah. So now there's no margin at the top. And one thing I was surprised, happily surprised, if you flip, then the margin flips on the other side. So you don't have to say anything about just the block end becomes the block start. And even if you say margin bottom, here it becomes so margin bottom becomes margin top. So there are a lot of cool defaults in the flipping, and it will trip you up. I know for sure you think, why is it happening? And that's because the default is kicking in. You can even justify, you can position it in the area. This, for example, you can say align self starts, and then it moves to the top of the areas. Oh, if you come to close, it will flip to the bottom. So align self start will become align self end. I think most time this is what you want, but sometimes you have to override it. It only works if you use the flip block. There's a more complex way to do position try fallbacks, then you have to do the stuff yourself. And then it's difficult. A last thing that you should know about anchor positioning, about simple things, they are both position absolute, and if the element has to be behind the anchor, so this won't work. Now it's not sticking, and that has something to do with the paint order. Is all the normal elements are positioned, then the absolute ones, and if the anchor looks for the element and it's not there, it doesn't know what to do. This means sometimes that you can use the after for things, but you can't use it before. Before is before elements, and the after is after elements. That was the Sunday night of my life last month. Okay, now to fun stuff. I like to move things around. So I have two lamps and then moth. So that are two labels, and in the labels is an input and an image, and it's just an element, an image. And if I switch the lamp, I want the moth to move between the two lights. The first approach, you could say that the label that has an input with the ID lamp, you can give them an anchor name. Example lamp 1. And the same thing for lamp 2, you can give him lamp 2. And then you can say is HTML as checked. I want to do something with the elements. The position anchor. Become this one. The same for second one. And then with the element, we can say position area is stop. I hope this will work. I won't.
I guess the name of the ID may be wrong there with the 2 dashes for the checked inside of the hash.
Thank you. And it changed, but it doesn't move, and that's because the position area isn't animatable yet. It might be, but not at the moment. So this is not working. So solution 1, weg ermee. Solution 2, let's make the element absolute again. Let's put the transition on there again. But you can say label as if there's something checked in there. We can give it an anchor name of lamp. That means that if the first one is checked, then only the first lamp has an anchor name, and if the second one, only the second one has an anchor name. And then we can say position anchor lamp. And we could use position area again. But it doesn't animate, so this is not what you want. There is an anchor function. You can use it in top, left, right, or bottom. So we can say that the bottom of the mod should anchor to the top of the lamp. We can say bottom, and then the anchor function. And then we can say top. And then now the bottom anchors to the bottom, also to the top, and we can do the same for the left, anchor, and then the left. Oh. And now it does animate because left and bottom are animatable properties, so this works. I think the mod is a little bit too big, so we can, and there's also another problem. The site is responsive, so if the lamp shrink, the mod doesn't shrink at the moment. So we can use for the width, you have another anchor function, that's the anchor size function. And if you use the width in there, you take the width of the anchor as the width for the element. Now, in this case, they are the same, but you can use calc in there, or for around there. You can calc is the width of the anchor multiplied by 80%. And it's a little bit smaller. And now, if we resize it, it will resize with the lamp. It's not in the middle anymore. So we have to do something with the left. This is a trick you probably all used with transforms. There's also center, and then it moves from the center, and then you can say we moved a little bit back, and that is the half of the width. Let's put calc in there, that helps. Calc is the anchor, so. Now it's in the middle again, and it resizes and it stays in the middle. And if you use this checkbox in here, we can make it actually fly like a modus. And because we use this, the concept is scalable to more elements. Here there are 5 lamps and 1 mod. And it works because we use a generic selector. What even works if you have elements in 2 dimensions, it will follow that as well. I'm a big fan of style queries, so I can use my own properties and then it just works. There are actually a lot of mods, so they are all, and there can be more elements that anchor to one element as well. And we can do some fun things with that as well. We can use a transition delay and do calc. And use the new sibling index function. and multiply by a little bit of time. And then all the mods move one after the other. But if you look closely, you see that the last mod, which is the first one in the HTML, but it's the last one because it's first in HTML, moves first. So if you want to flip this around, you can use the sibling count function as well. And then you have to subtract the index from it. Now the first one moves first, of the first one we actually see. A checkbox again here, then we can have them do multi things. So we can move things around from one element to the other, to another element. Let's see whether we can make that a bit useful. One of my students wanted to create a shop, and she wanted to do a flip thing, but with a curve. And we didn't know how to do it. I'm a lousy JavaScript programmer, so what I did, I gave every element its own path, and the path gets updated if you resize the screen or if you scroll. So there's a path, and every element knows how to follow that path. Let's turn on the sound. Quite complex, so, but we have one element and the other element, and we just saw we can move with anchor positioning from from one element to the other. So just for fun. So I made a little robot shop. This is the end position. That's a button with an image and a span, and we want to anchor to the image in a moment. The span is the counter for how many items are selected. Every robot is a label. There are two images. The first image is what you see now. That is the coast that will stay there. The second image is the image that will move from the robot to the base. And there's a radio button here to trigger the animation or the transition. Here's the base. That's the image in the button. I gave it an anchor name base, so I can anchor to that one. All the first images in the labels gave an anchor name ghost. So we can anchor to, I want to anchor their friend that's in there as well to the first image. And the second image is hidden for now, but now not anymore. So here they are. Now we can do stuff with them. So the start position is their coast. So we can use position, anchor, and then coast. And then I want to stick it to the coast. So we can use left, and then anchor left. And we can use right. Oh, right. And anchor right. And we can use bottom and then anchor bottom. And then there's a problem. Then and then there's a problem because they're all down here with the last elements. And that's because there are more anchors with the same name. And then they choose the last one of them. So they all stick to the last element that has that name. And there's a solution. I did first something tricky with customer properties, where you have anchors go. And you can use closed in there. And that means that this image will look for an anchor with coast within the label. It won't get out of the label to search for coast. Oh, so. And now they all anchor to their parent. I would expect that they would take the size of their coast now because they use left, right, and bottom, but they don't. So for now, I use width, anchor size, and then the width of the anchor. And then they are the same size in the same position at the starting point. Now we can move things around. And what I want to do, if the label is checked, then I want to move the second image. Dus you can have label as checked. And then you can do something with image and so type. And the position anchor was coast, and it should become base. If we use a transition in there, let's see if it works. Yeah, it works. Now, some things we have to use a set index because it's below there. Set index 2. And over there. I want to aim for the door, so it wasn't a problem to have to use the width because we want to change the width. If we use the width here, it will become the width of the base. And we can use calc in there. And say, I know by heart that is 15% of the base. So now they're small, but they're on that side, and we can use justification just like in grid and stuff. Dus we can say justify self and then center. And then they move to the center. All good until now. Let's save and refresh. The fancy animation is possible as well. I did use some JavaScript for this little view transition of the number and for the confetti, of course, but the rest is CSS. There's one problem. If you start scrolling, it won't work. And that becomes more prominent if you have a small screen. You see that they come from down below. I did read the spec, and I found this paragraph, and I was hopeful, but then I remembered the spec is not for normal people, it's for browser makers. So this is not how I can take scrolling into account, it's how the browser makers have to take scrolling into account. Quite complex, this text, so I made a little demo to see whether I understood what was there. There's a scroll context here and one over here. And this is an element I want to anchor to things. So, and it has its own scroll context, which is not part of the first list and also not part of second list. So now it doesn't scroll with either. If I explicitly anchor it to the first one, then it scrolls with the first one, but not with the second one. And if I explicitly anchor it to the second one, it is scroll with the second one, but not with the first one. And the problem, what I have, if I scroll with one and I move to the other scroll context, the scroll context swap is immediately and the animation is fluent afterwards. So we see this. And this is what I think is in the spec, so bummer. So could have been elegant to have a flip, but it's also elegant if you don't have to scroll. Third experiment. Last year, a team of my students made a social media simulator. And it's actually a social media bubble simulator. So you have some messages and some people, and they start interacting in social media network, and you see how the bubbles are created. And if you select one, you can see all the activities they do, and you can even make connections to disturb the world or send some messages. And I see nodes and I see connectors, so the perfect case for anchor positioning. So I have a person, I have a message, and I have a connector. And the person I gave the anchor name person, the message, the anchor name message, and then you can start with the connector. Let's start with the left. We can say anchor, and that should be to the person. You have to have the person name. And then center. The top is the same thing. So also the top should be here. Then we have the bottom. And that should not be the person, but the message. And the same thing goes for the right. And there it is. And you can move them around. For the dragging, I use JavaScript. Everything goes well until you move the message above the person. Because then the top is over here and the bottom is over here, and then they don't know, then the browser doesn't know what to do. To solve this, you can use min. And in the min, you have both the anchor of the person and of the message. And because the top and the bottom flip at the same time, we have to use this for bottom as well. Typo. And now if you move that to that side, it works. We have to do the same for right and left. And now we can move around and it works. Flips you up all the time. So I made a little tool. So I have two elements and you can move around, and let's start. Oh, that's to the right. So it has to take the shortest one of those two distances. So now the pink one and now the blue one. So that's the min function. And that is for all four directions. So now it has to use the blue top, now the pink top. And that's why min is working. Oh, back to the instead of top, left, bottom, and right, you can also use the instead property. And that takes top, right, bottom, and left. So we have to use this. So, and then now comma 4 times. Then we can, we can remove this. So it says top, right, bottom, left. And it's a shorthand, so we can even say this. And then it still works. Then for the line, now I have a gradient, and I can remove this gradient and use another gradient, background image, linear gradient. It should go to the top right. And I guess Niels' first talk at CSS Café was about this topic. So if you want to know why this works, look at the first CSS Café. And have some transparent in there, then some, no, let's do Niels' favorite color. Do some transparent. And then we can say calc 50% minus 1 pixel. The thing should start there and end at plus a pixel, and it starts up. Then we have a line. And it works, but not over here. It does work over here, here. I'm going to solve that in minutes. And then the animation. So this is the endpoint that it's here. This is the endpoint. And I have some code here. If this thing is checked, it should animate. So this code should go here. And the start point should be the person, and all the properties, left, right, bottom, and center, top, right, bottom, and left should all be at the center of the person. So we just could say this. And because it's the inset function that is a shorthand, it actually says this anchor person center 4 times. So now if you check it, it gets drawn, and if you put a little transition in there, transition, yeah. Then the line gets drawn. One problem, if you move around, there's a transition as well, so that doesn't work fine. That problem is actually quite easy to solve. Instead of a transition, we can use an animation. So this is the problem. Then it only happens once, and if it's drawn, there's no transition anymore. The second part is quite tricky, and Roman, I always forget his last name, Komaros, solved it more or less, but he's not happy, and I understand why. So here's because part of this solution is that you have to have 4 divs in there. For every line, for every quadrant, you have your own line. But it works. We can draw the line, and if you move to the other quadrants, it works. But here, the second div is used, here the 4th div is used, here the 3rd. But it's doable. Adam? But if you combine everything, I made a little social network. I wanted to draw all the lines. And then you can move the persons around and all the lines follow. And you don't have to calculate anything. They're just anchored to the person and the messages. For HTML, the persons have an ID, the messages have an ID, and the connectors have a from and a to attribute that link to the ID. So I don't have to write CSS. All the information is in the HTML where it belongs. Something different you can do with anchoring to multi-elements. I want to make a menu that takes into account that the menu can change the size. The size of the menu can change. Because if it wraps around, the menu becomes higher, and then this distance is different. I have a button, and I have a popover, and the button aims for the popover. So if you click it, it already works. You get that for free. And if you click beside it, next to it, it closes. And if you use escape, popover behavior. Styling. The first thing we have to do, we have to reset some popover styling. There's a lot of styling on the popover, so that is by default it's centered, but we don't want it in this case, so we have to width, the height, the margin, the padding, and the border we have to change. A lot better already. It's in screen, and you can scroll, so you can see everything. And one thing that I don't want to reset is the position. It's fixed by default, so we don't have to set it, but for clarity purposes, I do it anyway. So this is the default of the popover as well. Then the anchoring. I want to anchor to the bottom of the menu and then to the sides of the screen. So the top of the popover, anchor, and that should be the menu and then the bottom. And because it's a fixed element, for left, we can just use 0 for the bottom as well. Because that's behavior of a fixed positioned element. So if you know it starts at the bottom of the menu and it stops at the bottom of the screen. And if it changes sizes, it adapts to the size of the menu. Now for some animation. So it should start here and then move down. So the bottom should be at the bottom of the menu as well. So for the bottom, I can use this. So now it's here, 0 height. And if you open it, it does nothing. Because in the popover pseudo selector, we can say bottom 0. This is the open state of a popover. So now the bottom is here, and now the bottom is here. And it adapts to the size of the menu. For some animation, we can do a transition. Let's say half a second. Nothing happens, or nothing works. That's because you're animating from display none to display block, I guess. Now we have to say display. Also half a second, and then allow discrete, so it knows that it can discrete. So, and we have to use bottom over here. What did I do wrong? Oh, display. It works on the way back, not on the. That's because it doesn't know what to do from position on display none. So we have starting style to fix that. In style. And in there we have to say, you have to start here. And then it works both ways and it listens to the height of the menu. And then we can do some fun things. So the first one moves down, the second one moves from the left, and the third one does a swoopy thing. And that without difficult calculations. And you can scroll in it if necessary. Okay. So far for the mildly useful things. Now to the things that aren't useful at all. Maybe a little. For this one, I wanted the heart. I wanted to move to the king, but not all the way. And I wanted to move to the king and not all the way. So somewhere in between. So what I wanted to do was to see if I could put an element between two anchors. And you can. And it doesn't matter how they are positioned. If I move to the red part of the slide, it moves to the red. And if it moves to the blue, it moves to the blue. Let's see. This is what does the trick. And it's, again, the insert function. So you should read this 4 times for top, right, bottom, and left. And P is the percentage where you want to be. So if P is 0, then it's here. 0 means all the way on one side. And if P is 1, it's all the way on the other side. So that is something that could be useful. Then what I would have liked for what I did over in this example, if the element is farther away from the castle, the duration becomes longer. So this is a longer duration than over here. And for that, I need to know the distance between the element and the castle. And in here, I use JavaScript. I wanted to know whether I could get the element of the size of the anchor. And you can. This is the width of the element. This is the height. And with Pythagoras, you can put a square, b square, and then square root. Then you get the distance between the two. And I could have done something useful like calculating the duration, but that's too useful. So I did something not useful. I changed the size of the beach ball and the animation based on the distance between the two anchors. If you go too far, boom. And the last thing I want to show is you can also manipulate other elements. So you have 2 anchors here and a box down here. If I make them more apart, and the box changes. Oh, good. Okay, success. And then you can have the box do things instead of the element itself. This was the last example I wanted to show. If you want to look at my examples, this is the URL in the wavy flag. So good luck puzzling that out.